business leaders, I think, as we've seen today, really do have an absolute plethora of challenges in moving to a more sustainable future, which is, I think, all of us here want to see. The issue is how we do it, how fast we do it, and look at the issues around whether it's reputational and brand challenges, creating opportunities for customer and employee loyalty, reducing carbon costs, waste, you know it, we've had the list today. And that's what we're going to be talking about on the last panel. But I want to start first by putting it in the context of some of the feedback we're getting, or dare I say it, our partners at CGA by NIQ, as they are now called, now part of Nielsen, what they're finding from the broader community of business leaders. And I want to take you through a few slides and a few bits of data to give that context, and then we'll bring in our panel of leaders to see how they are seeing it, because I think it's interesting to see, because most people, my guess is, in this room today are pretty committed to the sustainability future. As we've heard, not everybody is. So let's have a look at what the market as a whole is saying. Basic question is are you concerned about sustainability? Well, are you concerned about sustainability in the context of all sorts of issues? 68% of people, of leaders say they are. They're concerned. And what it puts is basically sustainability is not at the top of the agenda, it's not at the bottom of the agenda, it's sort of in the middle. But what's interesting is the two issues which have sustainability consequences or linked to it, energy pricing, food and drink inflation, are two areas have most concern. So that whole point about sustainability being on the board is not just about this concept of sustainability, it's about real world problems. And energy and food supply are absolutely fundamental. Food supply is the thing we've been talking most about today. Interesting enough, who thinks about it more? And it's again probably not surprising. We're seeing here something we talk about a lot at Peach is the asymmetric market. We know a lot of people going out of business under pressure, other people are doing a lot better. And it is the companies who are more financially sustainable, as it were, or stable, who are addressing sustainability more. Because some of the other ones probably have other issues. But that will lead, I think, to a polarization around sustainability as well. The people who are able to invest in sustainability will do. And talking about confidence, and I think one of the reasons we're all here today is where do we start or what do we do? The one area where business leaders across are least confident in sustainability, 32% believe they are lagging the market against 22% who are. It's a negative of 11%. Much more confidence about technology, much more confident about marketing. A few years ago, that was very different. Basically, sustainability is the area of the industry board leaders need most help, but they are willing to invest. And this is interesting, I think. If they've got the money, they will invest. 68% are looking to invest in green technologies. Routine refurbishments are things that keeps the thing going, probably more. But basically, in terms of major developments, opening new sites, they are not as important as really getting that investment in green technology. So the issue is we're getting this picture of people get it. They are not necessarily confident about how to do it. Hence, dare I say, why we need to keep talking to each other. But I think that is really important. Now, what's being done? In a sense, it's the obvious stuff, and probably the easier, nothing's easy in this area, the easier areas like reduce waste. Those are the things getting done first. Around product sourcing and ways of working, much more work to be done, particularly around the supply side as well. And those are the things we've just been talking about, and certainly the importance of working with supply chains. And this is, in a sense, reflected in that broader market. But again, it is the companies who have the financial clout and financial headroom are really making progress more than the others. Going back to this idea of polarization, I think we're seeing it in every aspect of the market, which may be obvious, but it does have inherent problems for the market as well. And supply is absolutely fundamental. So you ask suppliers, what do you want more? Yeah, cheaper prices, of course. But it's interesting that number 2 is supporting becoming more sustainable, net zero. That is what business leaders across the board are saying to the supply industry. And I think what we heard from the supply industry earlier on, yeah, we're here to help and have that conversation. The question was, how do you start those conversations? But I think there are people who certainly want to have those conversations. Now, this is a tricky one. It is the area that most people, if they get that help, they're more willing to pay prices. Well, is that just wishful thinking, which we've heard? But certainly there is a sense that there is a price to be paid for working with suppliers and becoming more sustainable. So that's a bit of the background. So let me introduce our panel who are going to address some of those issues and see if they are in the same area. Please welcome Tim Doubleday, CFO of Burger King, who we've heard before. Thom Elliot, just got his B Corp certificate at Pizza Pilgrims. Joe Fleet of Caravan. Caravan, of course, won the Sustainability Award at Beach Hero and Icon Awards. And Thomas Heier, CEO of Wagamama's, who, let's face it, is one of the most on-trend brands in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel. This way, sir. No, not this time.
Wait, go ahead.
Yeah, in there. Yeah, that's great. Good. I've got my questions here somewhere, so don't worry about it. It's been a long day. We've covered a lot of topics today, and really what I want you guys, you're the people leading your businesses, and Tim has a job of leading the industry as well on liaising with government. So I really want to get a sense of where you guys are as companies who are probably ahead of the curve on sustainability, how you're going about it. So I suppose the first question is, where are you on the trail? What is working for you? What isn't working? And I'm going to start with you, Thom, and congratulate you on getting your B Corp certification as well. Well done, sir.
Yeah, very proud.
But apart from getting B Corp, where are you down the road on sustainability? What are you doing that works?
I mean, it's really, really interesting. I think we're very much at the beginning, like absolutely. And I think, we got B Corp, but just to put it in context, you have to get 80 points to get B Corp. We got 81.7. There is room to improve. So we ummed it out about whether we even say anything, but obviously, we're here today, and that's very, very nice. But yeah, I think we really try and do a lot. We're throwing a lot at it. We're working with Johnny Lockett up there, who is our, someone said that you need the person in the boardroom who's the naysayer. He is 100% the naysayer. Yeah. Can't recommend a better naysayer. So you need help,
but that's a good point.
You need help. And I started I still know very, very little about it. I know nothing compared to him. And I think it is about leadership. We hosted an event for the Zero Carbon Forum in our Selfridges site last week. And the idea was to get small and medium-sized businesses together, because I think we're the ones that can do, we can move quicker.
Yeah.
And it was, as always with this industry, it was so cool to get 30, 40 operators who were all doing their own, all tackling this in their own way, talking and going let me give you that person's email address. Let me get you, like a beautiful, I feel like we moved all of our businesses on a lot in an hour and a half. We even ate insects on pizza, which was a whole other conversation. But yeah, it's fascinating. But again, as always, it's the shit that's not exciting, that's never going to be a headline in CGA, Nielsen, whatever it's called now. They're the ones that are big. So the big thing we launched this week was something that's taken 6 months, which is a new door for our oven that is insulative, that is going to make sure that the oven, we're hoping the ovens are going to be 50 to 100 degrees hotter in the morning, which is 50 to 100 degrees we don't have to find every day in 20-odd sites. No one's going to put that on the top of any Propel newsletter or whatever. I'm not allowed to say that, probably. Not them.
You can say what you like.
Not them. These guys.
I am no longer in publishing, really.
But it is, I would say, the thing that's probably going to make the most impact in our business this year.
Yeah, fine. Well, interesting. So, in a sense, there is no silver bullet here. It is those small incremental gains you're looking at. Yeah. Thomas, can I bring you in? Because I remember when we talked at the top of the show about the business breakfast we had, and you were one of the guys there when we were discussing, what people have been doing. And one of the things you said, it really is a drumbeat of your business. Is that drumbeat getting louder?
It absolutely is. I think we are. I count myself fairly fortunate in that we have a purpose, we have a set of values, One of them is treading softly and mindfully, which is kind of effectively the way that we would express our sort of ambition around sustainability, but also kind of wellness, that sort of greater well-being agenda. So it's very much kind of a language that we use. It's something that people value and place value on. So culturally, I feel like we're kind of there in terms of focus and buy-in and understanding. I guess the bit that I think we've come further on probably in the last sort of probably 18 months, 2 years, is probably on some of the more sort of structural stuff. So really actually looking at data, understanding, looking at stuff that maybe isn't always comfortable to look at in terms of kind of where you are today, what you might need to change, what you can improve upon. And actually, but by doing that and sort of focusing on some of that more kind of, say smaller maybe, but I guess more sort of everyday stuff or stuff that you could actually attribute a value to has really helped to shift the dial, particularly in sort of scope 1, scope 2, and even sort of start to get into far more detail on scope 3 also.
So you really are embedding the whole thing in the business.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bit for me on the cultural piece, there's been a lot of conversation about people and the importance of people and talking about guests or consumers as people. I think kind of having the culture in the business sort of understanding and ready and almost self-policing and sort of supportive challenge coming from people, I think really makes a difference. We get called out by our teams on things that, perhaps maybe they don't understand because we haven't explained them, or alternatively on things that they think we could be better at, actually more so than our guests would call us out.
Yeah. Before I move on to Joe, what one thing has worked best for you at Wagamama in terms of changes you made around sustainability?
I would probably say the change that we made, probably the biggest impact is the change that we made to our delivery and takeaway packaging, which we did. We probably concluded that about a year ago, but it was a project that was a number of years in the making. We ended up, as a consequence, removing 330 tons of virgin plastic from our supply chain. I think that the bit that kind of worked well was the learnings, because actually it was incredibly complex.
Yeah.
We started in one journey, we kind of hit roadblocks. We thought one thing was right, then realized another thing was right. We had to pull upon quite a lot of different expertise. And actually, where we got to in the end is still not a perfect solution. And I think it's that sort of appreciation that in so many instances, there aren't always perfect solutions, but it's about getting to the best point you can, and then kind of continuing to iterate and improve, beyond that. Yeah.
Joe, let's move on to Caravan. I mean, you are under the spotlight because your peers voted Caravan as the most sustainable company, in that what you're doing is inspiring others at board level. So what are you doing to make Caravan such an example which other people in the industry want to follow?
Yeah, I mean, there's three real key areas that we look at, and I think the first one for us is menu, and we've talked about it before. So it's a very deliberate intention to take beef off the menu, and so we're able to work with seasonal vegetables and seasonality in terms of every produce, and then working alongside that with really great suppliers, so suppliers that really care, so therefore they're coming in for the long haul. So you're able to change things, but you're able to change it, and sort of you understand their belief as well. So they believe in the animal welfare, they believe in the provenance and that sort of thing. So really understanding the transition from farm to table, and then the long-term sustainability of it in terms of the building a relationship with people. It's like, some of our coffee farmers, we've been with them for 10 years, and so therefore they can invest in their practices and everything they do from a sustainability level, but also just being better at what they do. And so I think that's a really big side of it, and we're lucky that we're able to change the menu frequently to be able to do that. And equally, there's other two aspects is in terms of practices. So we have like Thom was mentioning about the pizza oven, we have an Uber machine, which means that we have reduced the amount of single plastic that we use for producing the milk, but equally we have probably the best most sustainable roasting machine that we use in Lambworks for all the coffee that we serve now. So, it's all about practices and machinery and that sort of side of it as well, and then equally on the build. So, I think everybody's gone down the track of saying, let's recycle, let's get everything from a light bulb or a light fitting to looking at green energy. So it's from the whole spectrum of what we can do.
What's driving that? Is it you? Is it the founders? Is it your staff? Is it your customers? Or is it a combination? What is driving you on down this road?
I genuinely think people want to do it, and I think it's the messaging on how you do it. You can spend an immense amount of time doing something which has very little impact. So it's like looking at it and going, okay, how can we genuinely make a difference without spending loads and loads of time doing the wrong thing? And I think that's where the mixed messaging is coming. And I think it's interesting when we saw the stats in terms of what people really understand about, you know, what does sustainability mean? Does it mean recycling? And that's probably because we all recycle at home, but we don't really know where that waste goes.
No.
We all probably think it,
don't want to know.
and they don't want to know.
Yeah.
But then also from a customer coming into a restaurant, I think it's so important to communicate with them to say, this is what we're trying to do. And if we're not brilliant at it, we're going to try harder. And I think that's the real message to say, we'll keep trying different things. And I think that's one of the beauties of people in restaurants is the fact that we're not scared to fail. We'll say, you know what, we haven't done that very well, but boy, we're going to do it better now.
Yeah. And Tim, picking up with you, I mean, you look at Burger King, you sell an awful lot of beef. So in a sense, but here you are personally, taking a real lead in the industry. How does that work? Because the outside world may not think that Burger King is an obvious company to take that sustainability route.
You read which magazine, Peter? We are up there in the top sustainable restaurants.
I know you are. Yeah.
Behind Wagamama, of course. But
I think I knew the answer, but I've got to ask the question. Come on.
No, I think as interesting as
yeah.
When we had a conversation, beef is obviously the big thing
in
our sector, for our business, but we've each got a beef in our businesses. And you have to look at those, those products, and they're the hard yards. So we know as a business, and when we bought the business in 2017, we put our house together from a sustainability perspective, and we looked at what's material, what's relevant, and you look at it and say, well, beef is something that we need to be able to talk about, and we need to be able to take a leading position on. Someone else should take a position on chicken, and we can probably follow the thing that they're doing. But beef is the one that we need to take a lead on. So it comes down to what's material and relevant in your business, how you address it. You can address the low-hanging fruit. We've all dined out on LEDs for 4 or 5 years. What's next? And we are now turning our attention to beef. We only have grass-fed UK and Irish beef. We are working very heavily at the moment with Bord Beer in Ireland, looking at sustainable farming for beef. And there's some really interesting things that come out of that's really early, probably in the journey. But you look at that and say, actually, you could take another 2/3 off the carbon footprint of the beef that you use. Yeah. So there's a lot to be done, but without using the journey word, again, it is. And it's going to take time.
Trail at the moment, so that will go out of favour soon. That's interesting because actually some of the research we got when we worked with Nutritics and CGL on consumer stuff, we could be able to split that out using brand track by brand. And what came clear, it's not just a middle class issue. Actually, people go to QSR or mainstream casual dining care as much. But are you getting that feedback from your customers? Is that?
I think we get very little feedback from customers that they are looking at sustainability as a purchasing requirement.
Yeah.
Our menu is 30% non-meat at the moment. We said that we will be 50% non-meat by 2030. We could easily do that, but in terms of sales, less than 10%. And actually, we probably reduced some of the items on our menu, through the sort of COVID and subsequent, because there seems to be a step back at the moment from what we see from a consumer in actually buying the non-meat products. And there's been lots of things in the press, haven't you seen, about vegan restaurants, vegetarian restaurants having to put on meat to survive. And I think there's a lot happening within cost of living at the moment that's actually impacting on that journey. Choose again.
Yeah, well, it's interesting what Paul Fladders was saying. It has had an impact, but the fundamentals are sort of there. In terms of your non-meat future, what's that going to look like? I mean, how how are you developing products in there, getting a product which is as tasty for the, you know, the burger eater, as it were?
You know, the start point for us, we haven't gone down the route of coming up with special products. You know, what we've said is we've got hero products. You know, we've got the Whopper, we've got the Chicken Royale, so we've made plant-based versions of those.
Yes.
And they're very good. And sometimes, particularly the chicken product, you know, we get complaints that we've sold the wrong product to somebody. No, and we know we haven't. You know, so, so that's one route. But what seems to be coming back to us now is that that's not what people want anymore. People actually want, you know, something like the bean burger that we've relaunched. You know, people want a vegetable product that talks about vegetable, not that's been processed to death through soy, has more sugar and salt in it than the beef product, et cetera, et cetera. So you have a sort of processed food pushback. Now. So I think our journey is going to be much more now natural plant-based products rather than manufactured plant-based products that taste, you know, as good. Yeah.
Thom, can I pick up a bit, talk about the communication thing? B Corp, really important. In terms of presumably what it's taught you, but one of the flip sides is that it comes up in lots of research as well. Internally, it's really, really important, but for the consumer, I haven't got a clue what B Corp is. So why did you go down that route?
I think we, I really felt that we did need the hand-holding of a third party to help us understand where our challenging areas are. So I think the B Corp thing was more of an education piece for us than anything else. We've obviously got it now, and we've had a big debate internally about whether we should promote it. And I think the bottom line is we've decided that obviously there was a bit of like noise about it today, but broadly it's going to be we're going to put it on places on touch points in the business for people who care, and we're not going to shout about it we're not going to try and convert people into understanding what B Corp is. I struggle quite a lot with I really think people come to eat out to have a nice time, and quite often that doesn't feel about an impending, it's not involving thinking about an impending planet implosion. So actually not talking about that is quite a big part. And I think, as with all humans, they just want to know that it's good without having to kind of do anything. And I think that's the bit that we're trying to do, is just kind of do it, because in 5-10 years' time, it's not going to be a negotiable. It's got to be done. Yeah. So I think we really do try and just get on with it and do it. And then occasionally we have something interesting like the Basil story. We do like talking about that, and it's great, and it's been a real win-win. And I think it's great to celebrate those. And I think mostly because, to the event we did with Mark, there is no plan B here. So we should all be, if we get this oven door thing to work, I should be hopefully helping every pizza company that has a pizza oven in the country to get this oven door in. I couldn't care less about the sort of competitor bit. That's not really the point. So we're all on the same planet, aren't we?
Yes. Well, it says something about planet up there.
I mean, that's what I heard. Yeah.
Look, we've talked today an awful lot about where we are, but I think for you guys, it's a matter of where we're going, because people do look to all four of you for leadership in the market. So let's focus on that, on the future. Thomas, where next for Wagamama? We've got a sense to some of the other companies about where they're going to be, particularly from Tim about this quite ambitious future. So for Wagamama, where are you wanting to take the brand, and how fast are you going to go?
I mean, look, it's we're on the same journey, we're on the same plan, so that there's not a sort of new plan kicking in. We're just sort of building on that plan. I guess some of the things to call out would be, obviously it's part of the whole decarbonisation piece, which we're actively focused on. We're going to be turning a little bit more to look at food. We've done that in ways that perhaps people wouldn't notice as much. We're moving towards using wild farm flour within our noodles, for example, all those sorts of things, but probably being a little bit more bold in that space. Now picking up on the point that Tim made earlier, we've also seen that switch in, I guess, that sort of guest/customer desire or lack of desire, reducing desire around vegan proteins. There's almost kind of a bit of a kind of negative connotation around that, and the whole sort of thing around ultra-processed foods. So if anything, you'll see more of our vegan innovation or our plant-based innovation being around, being vegetable rather than like that. But it will equally be trying to look at probably some of the more sort of difficult, some of the things that you sort of think actually that might shift or change my proposition. We're probably looking more at some of those things and really making sure that we are tackling the right things to make the right impact.
Yeah, and linking into that, obviously it's supply chain in terms of how are you working with existing suppliers or are you looking for new suppliers? How is the mix changing? And what reaction?
It is a combination of two. So I would say we're predominantly working with existing suppliers. We have some fantastic suppliers. We have a mix, so we have some that are helping to educate us on aspects. We have others who we are helping to educate, but we really want to work with that supplier to do that and sort of set that sort of bar a little bit higher. And we do have some instances where we're looking at a sort of new supply. I think we did a dish in January, which was a lion's mane steak, which was a marinated lion's mane mushroom, which was grown in the UK. It was actually, volume was incredibly difficult. You grow that mushroom. It's very impacted by kind of weather, temperature. The climate that we had sort of coming through the autumn and into early winter wasn't hugely favourable. So we really struggled in terms of being able to supply. Yeah. So I think we're learning as well around certain products that we want to use. Yeah. We have to probably think a little bit differently about them, and that might not be about working with a different supplier, but instead working together to figure out a better way to kind of ensure that continuity.
But without putting words in your mouth, supply chain is becoming more important.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
No, I totally agree.
And picking up, I mean, you touched on that already, in terms of how you're changing. Are you changing your suppliers as well, or working with existing suppliers? Because you mentioned that relationship is absolutely fundamental to Caravan.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely continue to work alongside our existing suppliers. I think the biggest thing for us is the longevity of it. There's so many benefits from it. I think that's the big part. To change to, well, I think supplier and that sort of relationship is actually crucial in any business. So why change if you can work well together?
Yeah. Now, one of the things that comes up in a lot of research is that consumers tend to relate to local sourcing is seen as, if you're sourcing local, you must be sustainable. But actually, it's much more complicated for an operator necessarily to go down that route. Do you play on that local supply? I know, look, you're in the middle of London, but in terms of
there's a bit of a benefit there, yeah.
Yeah, well, obviously urban farms are a thing.
I'm not worried about the lorries coming to us.
In terms of how people see, do you talk about your suppliers, and does that have a resonance with your consumer or your staff for that matter?
I think to the degree that we need to talk about it. But I think the big thing for us is sort of looking at where we are now and really looking at the goals to say, okay, where do we want to be and where do we want to get to? So I think whilst we're doing really well as we are now, I think it's also like a challenge to keep going. Yeah. And I think that's the big thing. And the people side is completely crucial. If your people aren't behind it, then, you might as well give in. Yeah. It's so much about belief and understanding in what you're doing, but belief, genuine belief, not just because you're saying this is what we're going to do.
Authentic.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. And Thom, I'm going to finish off with Tim in a minute. So, Thom, where next for you guys? I mean, you've got to digest the whole B Corp thing, but you're ambitious. Where next? And particularly as you grow a business and you're growing.
Where next? Trying to convince a Neapolitan mozzarella producer that's been doing it for many, many generations that they need to change their plan. That is hard. Right. I'm going there next week to do that, but it's a hard thing. But it's really interesting. I mean, the local sourcing thing. Yeah. We have built a business around 100% not sourcing our stuff locally, which is quite challenging. Yes. It's the biggest argument. The only argument that me and my brother have had is he wanted to move everything to London, and I was like, we are about Italy. Like, that's what we're about. Like, as soon as we take that away, like, it's a big problem. But then, you start to get into this stuff as everything, and you realise that, I've been obsessed, for example, about our mozzarella coming in expanded polystyrene. And I'm like, it looks awful. It goes out in huge bags of stuff. It's not recycled. It's just horrible. It's got to go. Let's work on a massive plan to get rid of it. Then you do the LCA, and you realise that it's like 0.05% of the problem. and it's like, it looks awful.
What's perceived, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the perception and the reality.
We're talking about that and transport as well.
So the truck that's bringing our mozzarella from the producer in Naples, which, you know, obviously we'd love to get rid of, and, you know, we're working on how we make it better. The fact that the mozzarella, the milk going to the mozzarella factory trucks are 50 to 70% full rather than 90% full is a much bigger impact. And actually, the cow itself makes all of that look like nothing. And that's an interesting
point. It's the unforeseen consequences, or it's not always the
It's like the plastic bottle of Coke is actually probably the most sustainable way to deliver Coke to anyone, because if you put it in glass, it's heavy, and if, you know, you can obviously do post-mix and stuff, but you know, it's so easy to jump on a bandwagon that sounds right, and then when you scratch the surface, it's
we
like...
won't get into bulk wine, that's a whole different thing.
No, let's not do that.
But Joe, can I come in on that? Because going back to Oaxaca, because you were at Oaxaca, and obviously those early days, I remember talking to Tommy Myers, you know, a lot of authentic Mexican, but she wanted ingredients sourced in UK. So how did you get across that thing about a lot of UK sourcing?
Yeah, I mean, there was all that side of it in the supply chain, definitely. But, you know, people want guacamole, and you're going to get it from where you can get it from, yeah?
Yeah.
But from the sustainability side, it was... and anyone who knows Oaxaca well, it was an obsession, an absolute obsession. You know, we looked at every single thing that we possibly could from a sustainability side, even from the wall, you know, painting the walls and the paint that we used to, you know, could we, you know, I don't know if anyone's used it. We had these toilet flushes which were just unbelievable. They never worked, but they were sustainable. You know, and people would come to you and they'd say, "Oh, you can't. The taps didn't work because it was at the early days of having the taps. The taps never worked, and you knew it, but they were sustainable." But you know, from that point of view, it was very much from the root. And I think there's lots that I've learned, definitely, and lots we can take into the business now.
There's a lot to be said for obsession.
Yeah, it's great. I think it was really good.
Yeah. Well, look, we are coming to the end, and one of the reasons I apologise for not taking questions, but there is a reason for this. Actually, there's not really, but actually, I hope you all stay for a drink and have these conversations with the people you haven't been able to ask questions to, because actually that's part of what we want to do, is keep the conversation going, and that's key. Last question though, and this is going to be to Tim. In your role working with government, what does, I mean, Kate sort of obviously touched on it and talked about it and how to communicate. But from an industry point of view, you know, what do we need from this government or the next government or any government, which actually might help us, apart from certainty? Or perhaps that is it.
I think we get to those sorts of areas. I think the first one, you know, that comes out in all the conversations we have around Hospitality Sector Council and so on. You come back to, you know, the point of rebalancing the balance sheet of the hospitality sector. The more you talk to people, then people want to make investment in sustainable. You know, people want to make sustainable investments. So on one of your charts, you know, people would like to do that. There are certain companies that can and certain companies that can't. So I think the start point for government is, you know, the tax burden that the sector has. You know, if you look at the increase in revenues this sector has paid from 2019 to 2023, that's equivalent to 2 pence on income tax, if that's what happens tomorrow. So we paid for it. You know, so all of that has to come back in. And if the sector has the right balance sheet, then I think the will in the sector to invest in the right kind of assets is there. So I think that's number one. The second one to me is around just consistency. You know, we've seen so much chopping and changing, politicking versus policy making. I think if government can be consistent, then that gives people certainty to make that investment. You can't make it if it's going to keep changing. There's lots of companies who've invested millions in deposit return schemes, and it's not happening yet. EPR, it's not happening yet. So, you know, whatever flavour of government we end up with, then let's hope it's stable and we actually get some consistency of policy. Yeah. And then I do think there are some things around incentives that would be good. You know, we were asked, and we had a meeting with Treasury, you know, what's your one ask of Treasury? Well, you know, we've been asking for capital allowances for green investment, but actually what it really comes down to is just a good, strong energy infrastructure. Because actually what stops us investing is it costs £50,000 to upgrade the energy of a pub to put in an electric kitchen. It costs £200,000 to put energy on a high street. Now, if I pay for that, everyone else can have it. But I shouldn't be paying for that. The energy company should be paying for that. Yeah. So we need government to actually provide the infrastructure that allows sectors like ours to go through electrification and so on, which would help everybody on that journey.
Well, let's see if there's anything in the budget. Well, we will take bets. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, our panel. Thank you.